Okay, I think we are ready to go. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Protecting Vidal Bay, Conserving Shore-to-Shore Wilderness on Manitoulin Island. We are going to start today's presentation with a brief video that we put together, really just to give you a sense of the awesome scale of the opportunity at hand.
For 200 years, human development has been dividing the wild lands of southern Ontario. For nearly 60 years, the Nature Conservancy of Canada has been ensuring there's still space for nature in our country's most populated region. But the pressures on Ontario's wild spaces have never been greater. Remarkably, at the northern edge of southern Ontario, in the heart of the Great Lakes, we have a once-in-a-lifetime chance to protect something bigger than we ever dreamed possible. Help us create one of southern Ontario's largest protected areas.
My name is Dana Kliniewski. I'm the Director of Development and Communications for the Ontario region, and I will be your moderator for today. I'd like to start by stating that we at the Nature Conservancy of Canada respectfully acknowledge that the work we do across the country is the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations and communities, past and present. For a millennia, they have worked to protect these landscapes and the life these areas sustain. I would like to thank these original caretakers and acknowledge the ongoing work and presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada today. The Nature Conservancy of Canada is a national charity and Canada's leading not-for-profit private land conservation organization, working to protect the most important natural areas and the species they sustain. Since 1962, NCC and our partners have helped protect 14 million hectares. That's 35 million acres, coast to coast to coast. To learn more, visit our website at natureconservancy.ca. One of the key aspects of our work is acquiring private lands in order to protect them for the future. In some cases, these lands are very generously donated to us, but we do also work to purchase lands that are of high ecological significance. And we've been working on purchasing a very special property over the past 4 months, the Vidal Bay Forests and Shoreline property on Manitoulin Island. NCC has long wanted to secure this property for conservation, and the opportunity to purchase it presented itself toward the end of last year, and we knew it was an opportunity that we just had to try and make happen. We're currently working to raise $16 million to acquire and steward this incredible property for the long term. And I'm happy to say that we're already 85% of the way towards our goal, and we're thrilled to tell you more about the project today. We are going to be joined by 3 NCC speakers today. Vari McFarlane, our Director of Science and Stewardship in Ontario, Esme Batten, our Program Director for Midwestern Ontario, and Megan Bonifant, our new Coordinator of Conservation Biology for Midwestern Ontario. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to quickly cover a few housekeeping topics. As we're joined by people from across the country, you may experience a temporary glitch during the live stream. We thank you in advance for your patience. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be sharing a link to the recording after the event, so please keep an eye on your inboxes. And we welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with colleagues, friends, and family. We want you to join in on the conversation and share your thoughts with our online community. Feel free to connect with us through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram using the hashtag NCC NatureTalks during and after the webinar. And of course, we also invite your comments and questions. You'll notice there's a little Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point, just type it in there. Please include who the question is intended for, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar. At this time, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Vari McFarlane. She is our Director of Science and Stewardship for Ontario. She's going to tell you a bit about NCC's planning process to help you understand how a project like Vidal Bay fits into our conservation objectives. Vari received her undergraduate degree in ecology from the University of Stirling, Scotland, and her PhD in behavioral ecology from the University of Exeter in Cornwall, England. She has worked as a conservation biologist for the Nature Conservancy of Canada since March of 2008 and is currently, as I mentioned, our Director of Science and Stewardship here in Ontario. The floor is all yours, Vari.
Thanks so much, Dana, and welcome to everybody for joining us today. As many of you already know, the Nature Conservancy of Canada is in the forever business, taking care of our properties for the long term. I'm here to talk a little bit about what at first might seem really rather boring, planning. However, I promise it's actually quite exciting. Our planning, budgeting, monitoring, and reporting make this forever thing that we keep talking about actually real, which is why it's so important. We plan at 3 different scales: the ecoregion, the natural area, and then the property. These 3 scales of plans are meshed together and talk to one another, with work on the ground at the property scale feeding back up to reporting on our goals at landscape scale. Each of these dark green areas across the whole country are natural areas for which we have a plan. Our plans are flexible, allowing us to keep revisiting priorities as new information emerges and priorities change. Not only do they not gather dust on the shelf, they barely even make it to the shelf because we reference them every single day. We have several natural areas throughout Ontario. All of these shaded green areas have a landscape scale plan, which is driving our work and keeping us strategic in every way. Today, we're talking about this very special natural area, as Dana already mentioned, the Manitoulin Island Archipelago natural area. This is a very special place because although it's quite far north in Ontario, many of the plant communities and species which occur here have a really strong southern feel to them. Zooming in on the Manitoulin Island Archipelago natural area just a little bit, this is an example of some of the detailed analysis we do to try to understand where we can be the most effective with our conservation work, whether it's the direct protection of land, as we're talking about today, supporting partners and communities in their efforts, or stewardship of lands and water. As I already mentioned, our planning process is really dynamic. It's not static. We're still subject to opportunity and willing landowners who want to work with us. Speaking of water, this is a key consideration of our work in the Manitoulin Island Archipelago in particular and beyond. It's an area of spectacular coastlines like here on Coburn Island, wild inland lakes, streams, and important wetlands. Protecting and, where necessary, restoring these habitats is the best way to maintain and improve water quality for people to drink, work, and play in. Not only is clean water important for people, it's also essential for many plants, birds, and animals that depend on it to survive and raise their young, including these common loons, common mergansers, and of course our friend the beaver. And of course this comes full circle back to people, as so many of us get so much pleasure from being able to see these cool animals. Everything we conserve contributes, of course, but opportunities to protect large, contiguous tracts of land are very unusual, even this far north in Ontario. Large tracts like Vidal Bay allow animals like black bears to move freely in their quest for suitable habitat throughout their life cycles. This is becoming increasingly important with climate change as food sources, denning sites, and the timing of bird and insect migration changes. Birds like this Blackburnian warbler are heading back north right now, in fact, and we're working hard to make sure they have safe places to refuel and nest when they arrive in a few short weeks. Protecting large blocks maintains corridors which can continue to support important ecosystem processes and spectacular wildlife. And with that, I'll pass it back to Dana.
Thank you so much, Vari. We appreciate your help framing just how important opportunities like Vidal Bay are in the larger conservation context. Our next speaker today is Esme Batten, Program Director for Midwestern Ontario. Esme has worked for NCC's Ontario region for almost 6 years, with most of her work focused on the Saugeen-Bruce Peninsula, Manitoulin Island Archipelago, and Lower Maitland River Valley. Her role in the organization is to seek out properties that NCC wants to acquire and to work with willing landowners to come up with some kind of conservation agreement or arrangement. It could be a purchase, a donation, or some other kind of agreement. And Esme has played a lead role in negotiating our agreement for Vidal Bay. Take it away, Esme.
Thank you all so much for taking time out of your days to learn about the amazing opportunity we have to protect Vidal Bay on Manitoulin Island. Like most conservation projects we undertake here at NCC, they're ever evolving and changing. And I still pinch myself that we're able to make it here, discussing our opportunity to protect Vidal Bay forever. As Vari mentioned, although our securement at NCC is strategic and science-based, led by our natural area conservation plans, it's also opportunistic, and we don't often get the opportunity to work with conservation at this scale. Although I've worked for NCC for almost 6 years now, I still find myself amazed by the conservation work we're able to achieve, working together with communities, partners, and supporters, and Vidal Bay is certainly not an exception. However, I wouldn't be able to talk to you all about Vidal Bay and its significance without sharing the story of how we got here, and it's a conservation opportunity over 20 years in the making. Before I started working for NCC, our colleagues and partners knew Vidal Bay, the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, Mindu-Missing Provincial Park, Coburn Island, and other lands on the western end of Manitoulin were globally significant, and support some of the best remaining examples of globally rare alvars in North America, while providing critical habitat for at-risk species. You might be wondering what an alvar is, and they're globally rare ecosystems that support a unique group of plants where entire worlds seem to unfold in miniature. They are characterized by limestone or dullstone bedrock with varying amounts of trees, shrubs, and grasses dependent on the soil in the area. The species that grow on alvars must be hardy as they face periods of flooding and drought throughout the year, where the community can reach temperatures of over 52 degrees Celsius. These harsh conditions help keep alvars open, and as a result, they are home to many globally rare and at-risk species that have adapted to life in these unique habitats, including rare mosses and lichens, which are some of my favorites. We're lucky to have over 60% of the world's alvars here in Ontario, and some of the best examples on Manitoulin Island and at Vidal Bay. So the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, Mindu-Missing Provincial Park, just south of Vidal Bay, was protected in the 1990s, working in partnership with Ontario Parks. Following that, NCC had the opportunity to start protecting Coburn Island in 2012, just to the west of Vidal Bay. Since then, with the help of our supporters, we've been able to protect over 62% of the island, or over 10,700 hectares. NCC lands on Coburn Island now represent one of the largest protected intact hardwood forests in southern Ontario, while providing habitat for bald eagles, colorful warblers, and unique plants like Houghton's goldenrod. Coburn Island represents a unique opportunity to preserve the function of a large-scale and diverse ecosystem, while allowing natural processes to continue uninterrupted. Little did we know then, all of our work up until this point, including our work on Coburn Island, has led us to an incredible opportunity to purchase a massive property on the western edge of Manitoulin Island. The Vidal Bay Forest and Shoreline property truly represents the landscape level approach to conservation that is so urgently needed right now. Vidal Bay Forest and Shoreline is a 7,600 hectare property featuring coastal cliffs along the edge of the Niagara Escarpment, over 18 kilometers of undeveloped Lake Huron shoreline, pristine inland lakes and wetlands, and intact forests and alvars. When combined with nearby and adjacent conservation lands that NCC has already conserved, this will become a protected area complex of 250 square kilometers, or over 24,000 hectares, the largest of its kind south of the Canadian Shield in Ontario. It will conserve an astonishing 86 kilometers of Great Lakes shoreline, more than twice what is currently protected at the Bruce Peninsula National Park. I had the pleasure of visiting the property last year, as you saw in the video, and it's almost impossible to describe how truly incredible this opportunity is. Manitoulin Island is the world's largest freshwater island, and while we don't often think of Manitoulin as being part of southern Ontario, the species and ecosystems that are found on the island are more typical of those found further south, despite how far north it is. When compared to the Canadian Shield to the north, Manitoulin Island supports deeper soils on limestone bedrock that are home to really unique groups of plants and animals. Manitoulin has always been a priority for conservation, but the island faces ever-growing pressures to its natural spaces. Much as I have experienced living here on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula, the quiet beaches, soaring cliffs, and clear turquoise waters bring more people to visit the island each year. Ever-growing development pressures for cottages and second homes pose stress on these ecosystems, and like most of the Great Lakes shoreline, the opportunity for conservation has become few and far between. Vidal Bay's alvars, forests, wetlands, and grasslands provide essential ecosystem services to the region. This includes carbon storage, removal of air pollution, and floodwater storage. While the carbon sequestration and storage benefits of the property are important in our collective efforts to reduce greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere, the property is particularly critical for water quality and quantity and the protection of intact shoreline. The property provides an excellent example of the scale we need to work at in order to combat climate change. In addition to its biological significance, it also holds importance to local communities that have cared about this landscape for generations. We're excited to work together as we have on Cobourg Island with local communities and the 7 First Nations to learn how we can best steward this landscape from those who have always cared for this place. We share a mutual vision for our children and our grandchildren to experience true wilderness here in southern Ontario. There may never be another opportunity to set aside such a large tract of ecologically significant land in southern Ontario again. And I look forward to talking to you all later in the Q&A. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you, Esme. Thanks for sharing with us what an incredible opportunity we have here at Vidal Bay. I think you've really helped to bring this project to life. Our final speaker today is Megan Bonifant. She is a coordinator of conservation biology for Midwestern Ontario. Megan just recently joined the Nature Conservancy of Canada a few weeks ago, and she is responsible for the on-the-ground management of NCC's portfolio of lands on Manitoulin Island and on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula. Megan actually lives in the woods on Manitoulin Island, and through her previous work experience on the island has been able to build relationships with local communities, and we're really excited to have her on board. And when you are ready, Megan.
Thanks, Dana. I joined NCC just a few short weeks ago, and I'll be coordinating the stewardship of NCC's properties in the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula and Manitoulin Island Archipelago natural areas, including Vidal Bay. And I know what you're thinking, and yes, NCC is entrusting one of the largest properties in Ontario in our organization's history to the new girl. No pressure. I honestly can't imagine a more exciting time to be joining NCC. I live here on Manitoulin, and to be part of creating and stewarding this incredible protected area complex right here at home, it really doesn't get any better than that. Securing the Vidal Bay property is just the beginning. Stewardship, managing the land for the long term, is at the heart of what we do. Stewardship can include activities like restoring habitats, monitoring for species at risk, removing invasive species, maintaining trails, installing signage, and any other actions that help nature be nature. Each and every property we protect is monitored and managed so that ecosystems are maintained and species thrive. But how do we determine what actions we take on a particular property? We collect data and make a plan. We collect as much data as we can about a property in what we call a baseline inventory. Prior to field season, we collect information from existing databases and publications, as well as local knowledge about the property's past and current use. Things like habitat types, known species, any existing trails or structures. Then we head out on site to ground truth the information we've already collected and add to that knowledge. This is the super fun part. I'm very much looking forward to spending a large part of my spring, summer, and fall surveying Vidal Bay, and hopefully enlisting local community groups in the effort. I'm really excited to learn for the opportunity to learn more about this land story, to learn from local First Nations and communities about the historical and traditional uses and stewardship of Vidal Bay. At NCC, we recognize that we have conservation expertise through a specific lens, but there are other ways of knowing, and we have more to learn. Now, we could spend years inventorying this incredible property and still not capture everything. So that's not our ultimate goal. We'll collect as much data as we can in the first year to inform the development of a property management plan, or a PMP. In this planning process, we take everything we've learned about the property through the baseline inventory, and we use it to set conservation goals and figure out what actions we can implement on the ground to achieve those goals. The goals in the PMP will be consistent with the goals in the Natural Area Conservation Plan, as Vari explained earlier. Annual monitoring is, of course, a critical component of every property management plan, and we adapt our actions as needed based on the results of our monitoring and any new information we gain along the way. So, what might Vidal Bay's PMP look like? We can't say for sure at this point because we're just beginning the information gathering process. That being said, based on what we do know already, we can make some broad generalizations about possible stewardship actions. For example, we know that there's Phragmites, which is a really aggressive invasive plant, also known as common reed, growing along the shoreline at Vidal Bay. So our plan will certainly include controlling invasive species. We've already got a keen group of volunteers ready to help us with this, which is fantastic. We also know some populations of species at risk on the property, so monitoring these populations is very likely to make it into the plan. Lakeside daisy, that cheerful looking yellow alvar plant, is also called Manitoulin gold here. 95% of all the lakeside daisy in the world occurs in Ontario, and a good chunk of that is here on Manitoulin. We also have Monarch Butterfly at Vidal Bay. Monarchs have become a really powerful symbol of international conservation efforts, and they really resonate with a lot of people. I also strongly suspect we'll find Blanding's turtle at Vidal Bay, and I'm sure there will be many other interesting species that turn up as we get out onto the landscape. Facilitating scientific research is also a possibility at Vidal Bay. As Esme mentioned, Vidal Bay contains beautifully intact alvar, a globally rare ecosystem type that supports lots of really interesting species. Many of these species are at the northern limit of their range here on Manitoulin, like Manitoulin gold. As species adapt to a changing climate, Manitoulin might have a really important refuge role to play, and having intact ecosystems in which to study these changes is pretty exciting. The shore-to-shore nature of the protected complex being created also provides some neat opportunities to study wildlife movement on the island. And lastly, we can't talk about stewardship without talking about people. We rely heavily on our local partners to help work with us every step of the way, from collecting baseline inventory data, sharing their stories, to getting into the mud with us to eradicate invasive species. Throughout the planning process, we'll work with local communities and First Nations to figure out uses of the property that are compatible for both people and conservation goals. This might involve shifting uses away from certain locations, like moving trails out of sensitive habitats. But we recognize that in order to care for the land, people have to feel connected to it, and that means spending time with it. Getting people out there, fostering a love for nature, rediscovering their place within it, can only strengthen whatever other conservation successes we might achieve at Vidal Bay. I can't wait to see what we can accomplish together.
Thank you so much, Megan. We're really grateful for your time today and for sharing your expertise, and we are optimistic that you'll be out at the property in the near future, implementing all these great stewardship projects and initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, since November, we've been able to assemble 85% of the funding needed to purchase and steward Vidal Bay, $13.6 million of the $16 million. And I want to take this opportunity to thank those of you on the call who are with us who have contributed so generously already. We truly appreciate it. If you would like to be part of this historic project and can help us close the gap, we'd love to hear from you as well and encourage you to reach out to us. All right, we have several questions for the speakers that have been submitted by the audience. Looks like there's quite a few questions. So as a reminder, if you have a question that you have not yet submitted, please enter it using the Q&A chat box feature. Let us know who the question's for, and we'll get through as many questions as time allows. Okay, so just looking for one of our first questions. First of all, loving the girl power on display. Thank you. My question is, what are island folks saying about the purchase? Are they welcoming NCC? This seems like a good question for Esme and Megan. Maybe we'll have you both weigh in.
Sure, happy to take the first question. So thank you so much. Certainly really happy here at the Nature Conservancy of Canada to have over 70% of our staff identify as women. And the question about what are the Islanders thinking, we've certainly had some really positive feedback about NCC's acquisition of Vidal Bay, and we understand that we're really looking forward to kind of learning from the local communities about trails and other things that are of interest in the area, and kind of working together to develop a plan moving forward.
Great, thanks. We have another question here. What's the situation with taxes?
Yeah, I can take that one as well. We certainly understand that there's local interest in taxes and have been working actively with both Robinson and Dawson Township representatives to kind of find a path forward for the future.
Thank you so much. A question, what is the status of the few small blocks that are shown in white on the map? This is likely a question for Esme. So as you'll remember in that map we showed of the property, there were a few cutouts within.
Yeah, so those properties are owned by private landowners. So we certainly look forward to reaching out and getting to know them and kind of learning about their history with the property and how we can work together to steward Vidal Bay in the future.
Great, thanks. Another question, are there First Nations lands within or bordering on the Vidal Bay tract, and do they have a role as partners in any way in this project? I think that's another question for Esme. Sorry, Esme.
No problem. Happy to answer. So NCC acknowledges that Indigenous people have protected and cared for the natural areas, plants, and wildlife that have sustained them for millennia, and that we have much to learn from Indigenous peoples across Canada to become better land managers and conservationists. And NCC is committed to building on our existing skills and experience as well with working with and learning from Indigenous people across Canada. And in the case of Vidal Bay, we've been in touch with leaders from Wikwemikong First Nation and the United Chiefs and Council of Minising, and have had discussions about ways we can work together to steward these lands. So this can include, for example, monitoring species at risk and managing invasive species. It's early days yet, but we certainly look forward to growing our relationships over time with the First Nations of Manitoulin and stewarding this place together.
Great. This is a question maybe for Megan. Will public trails be developed on the area?
That's a great question. One I can't really answer at this point in time since we're just beginning the property management planning process. That will be something that we consult with local communities about and determine the best way to move forward on that.
Thank you. If a local landowner already has an existing forest management plan, will there be an opportunity to compare data and information with the NCC's plans?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So yeah, certainly we really love the opportunity to kind of learn from existing conservation work and kind of understanding of neighboring lands and see how we might kind of bring in information from those plans into ours and kind of make sure that those different types of plans for conservation kind of align with one another. So we certainly would be happy to chat about that and would love you to get in touch.
And another question, when do you need to raise the money by?
I can take that one too. So we're committed to have all the funds, including the purchase price, associated costs like legal fees, and contribution to our stewardship endowment fund to manage the property for the long term, in place by the end of the year. Of course, if we can raise the money before then, that would be great as well, but that is our plan.
A similar question to what we heard, with a bit of a twist. Will Vidal Bay be accessible to the public, and how do you balance the needs of species with the needs of people? I'm going to ask maybe if Vari can answer this question from a planning perspective, perhaps.
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's a great question, and it is something we grapple with right across the country, in fact. Our primary mission is to conserve land and habitat for rare species and the things that aren't rare yet, but we recognize increasingly that we need to provide access for people to experience some of these incredible places in a way that's safe for both people and biodiversity. We're confident that through our property management planning process, we can come up with a good solution for both people and wildlife, often on the same property, sometimes on adjacent properties. And that's actually one of the reasons that the opportunity to secure such a huge tract of habitat is so important. It makes it potentially a lot easier to support the needs of both people and wildlife simultaneously. So we're excited to work out what that looks like here.
Thanks, Vari. The next question is, will residents with properties adjacent to the NCC property be impacted by conservation activities? For example, would they be limited in the types of activities permitted on the property, presumably?
So I can take that one. So certainly we love to work with neighboring landowners, but we definitely don't restrict kind of what activities can occur on other private lands. So we look forward to working together, as I mentioned, with neighbors to understand kind of what species are on our property and in the area, but we wouldn't be limiting the types of activities that are happening on someone's private property.
Great. And another question, what other properties on the Bruce Peninsula does NCC currently steward/manage? Esme, you live on the Bruce Peninsula. Maybe this is a good one for you to take as well.
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually currently in Lions Head, so not too far from Southampton. And we're lucky to have manage approximately 5,000 acres of land here on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula. They kind of stretch from the Owen Sound area up to Tobermory, but certainly feel free to go to our website for more information about our work on the peninsula, and certainly feel free to reach out to us as well for more information. Great.
Well, I think that might be all the time we have for questions right now. We just want to thank everyone again. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have something else you'd like to ask any of our panelists, of course, please reach out to us at events@natureconservancy.ca, and we will gladly pass those along to the speakers and we'll get an answer back to you. So thank you again to everyone who joined us for today's webinar. Vari, Esme, and Megan, thank you all for sharing your insights and expertise. For more information on the Vidal Bay project and to support the conservation efforts, please visit natureconservancy.ca/vitalbay. For updates on future webinars and events in your area, check out our events page at natureconservancy.ca/events. And stay tuned for the link to today's webinar recording. You'll receive that in your follow-up email within the next 24 hours. And on behalf of the Nature Conservancy of Canada, thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. We hope to see you next time.